The email notification sound was like a death knell. I stared at my computer screen, my blood running cold as I read the words "message sent successfully" beneath an email addressed to Adrian Castellano, my boss, the CEO of Castellano Media Group, and the man I'd been harboring an impossible, unprofessional, absolutely catastrophic crush on for the past 8 months. The subject line mocked me. Things I can't say. My stomach dropped to somewhere around my feet as the full weight of what I'd just done crashed over me, like a tidal wave. This wasn't supposed to happen. The letter was never meant to be sent. It was therapy, a way to process feelings I knew could never be reciprocated. A private document where I could admit truths I'd never speak aloud. I'd been working late, exhausted from another 14-hour day, updating the quarterly report Adrian needed for tomorrow's board meeting. The letter had been open in another tab, a moment of weakness. During my lunch break, where I'd added a few more pathetic paragraphs about how his smile made my chest ache and how I'd memorized the exact shade of his eyes, steel gray with flecks of blue like a storm over the ocean. But somehow, in my sleep-deprived state, I'd attached the wrong document. Instead of Q4_financial_report_final.pdf, I'd sent letter_to_Adrian.docx. 3,000 words of raw, unfiltered emotion detailing exactly how I felt about my boss, including some particularly vivid descriptions of what I wanted to do if he ever looked at me the way I looked at him. YouTube safe, of course, but emotionally explicit enough that there was no mistaking my feelings. No corporate jargon could save me from this disaster. Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. Oh God. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone, my mind racing through impossible scenarios. I could say my account was hacked. I could claim it was a creative writing exercise. I could fake my own death and move to a remote island where no one had ever heard of email or inappropriate workplace relationships. The letter had been sent exactly 4 minutes ago. It was 11:47 p.m. Maybe Adrian was asleep. Maybe he wouldn't check his email until morning. Maybe I had time to break into his apartment and delete it before he saw my phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number that I somehow knew with sinking certainty was him. My office. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Don't be late. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. How did he have my personal number? Why was he texting me at midnight? And why did even his text messages have to sound so commanding and attractive? I was clearly losing my mind. This was a catastrophe. I was going to be fired. Worse, I was going to be humiliated, then fired, then possibly escorted from the building by security. While everyone whispered about the pathetic assistant who fell for his impossibly handsome and impossibly straight, impossibly unattainable boss, I spent the rest of the night not sleeping, alternating between staring at my ceiling and refreshing my email to see if Adrian had responded with something. Anything that might give me a clue about what tomorrow would bring. Was he angry? Uncomfortable? Planning to have HR present for the termination? The only mercy was that it was a Saturday. Tomorrow, technically our day off. Though I often came in anyway to keep up with Adrian's relentless schedule. At least, there would be fewer witnesses to my professional execution. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and spent 2 hours revising my resume and researching job opportunities in other cities. Maybe other countries. Antarctica was looking particularly appealing. By 7:30 a.m., I was standing outside the Castellano Media Group building. Nursing my 4th coffee of the morning and trying not to vomit from anxiety, the building was almost empty on a Saturday. Just a few dedicated employees and the security guard who waved me through with a knowing smile that made me wonder if gossip had already spread. Impossible. No one else knew. Unless Adrian had told someone. Unless he'd forwarded my letter to HR with a complaint. Unless this was somehow worse than I'd imagined, which seemed unlikely, but not impossible given how this day was starting. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like ascending to my own execution. Each floor that passed was another few seconds closer to facing Adrian and the aftermath of my colossal mistake. I'd worn my best suit navy blue, perfectly tailored, the one Adrian had once complimented in passing 6 months ago. A moment I'd replayed in my mind approximately 8,000 times since. If I was going down, I was going down looking professional. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the executive floor in its usual state of intimidating elegance. Glass, steel, an expensive art that probably cost more than my annual salary. Adrian's office was at the end of the hall, corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The door was open. He was standing with his back to me, silhouetted against the morning light, hands in his pockets as he stared out at the skyline. Even from behind, he was devastating tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that always looked professionally tousled, like he'd just run his fingers through it, which he probably had. He did that when he was thinking, a habit I'd cataloged along with dozens of others in the months I'd worked as his executive assistant. Close the door? Jamie. His voice was quiet, controlled, giving nothing away. I did as instructed, my hand trembling slightly on the handle. The click of the door closing sounded final, like a cell door locking. I stayed by the entrance, maintaining as much distance as possible, my messenger bag clutched in front of me like a shield. Adrian turned slowly, and for the first time since I'd sent that email, I had to face him. Had to meet those storm-gray eyes and see whatever was there: anger, disappointment, disgust, pity. What I saw instead was something I couldn't read at all, an expression so carefully neutral, it was almost worse than outright anger. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the chairs in front of his desk. It wasn't a request. I crossed the office on unsteady legs and sat, perching on the edge of the seat like I might need to bolt at any moment. Adrian didn't sit. Instead, he walked to his desk, picked up a printed document, my letter. I realized with fresh horror he'd printed it hand, held it between us, like evidence at a trial. "Do you know what this is?" His voice was measured, almost conversational, which somehow made it worse. Yes, my voice came out hoarse. I cleared my throat. "Sir, I can explain." But he raised one hand, cutting me off with the gesture. His hands were elegant, long-fingered, the kind of hands that looked like they should be playing piano or painting masterpieces, instead of running a multi-million-dollar media empire. I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time thinking about those hands. Thoughts that were probably detailed somewhere in the document he was currently holding. "I don't want explanations," Adrian said, moving around his desk to lean against the front of it, now only a few feet away from me. Too close. Close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and understated that I'd never been able to identify, but that made my brain short-circuit every time I caught a whiff of it. "I want you to read it." Out loud. To me, the words took a moment to process. When they did, I was sure I'd misheard. "I'm sorry, what?" "You wrote this letter to me," Adrian continued, his expression still maddeningly neutral. "Or about me, technically, though it's addressed to me in several places. 3,247 words about your feelings, your desires, your thoughts about our working relationship, and what it could be if circumstances were different." He tapped the papers against his palm. "So I want to hear it. All of it. In your voice. Starting now." This couldn't be happening. This was some kind of nightmare or a punishment, or possibly both. "Adrian, Mr. Castellano, I don't think that's an order." "Jamie." His voice dropped lower, taking on that tone he used in the boardroom when he expected absolute compliance. When there was no room for negotiation or argument, "Read the letter." He held the document out to me. I stared at it like it was a live snake, my heart pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it in the quiet office. This was humiliation on a level I hadn't even imagined. But what choice did I have? Refuse and be fired? Walk out and never come back? At least if I read it, I could control the narrative, could maybe explain as I went. Kadai took the letter with shaking hands. The paper felt heavy, weighted with every foolish word I'd written in moments of weakness over the past months. Adrian moved back around his desk and sat in his executive chair, leaning back with his fingers steepled in front of his face, watching me with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. "Begin," he said simply, and because I was apparently a coward with no survival instincts whatsoever. I began to read. Dear Adrian. My voice wavered on his name. Too intimate without the protective buffer of Mr. Castellano. I cleared my throat and continued. I'm writing this letter because I need to say things I can never actually say to you. Things that would be inappropriate and unprofessional and would probably get me fired if you ever knew. Adrian's expression hadn't changed, but his eyes were fixed on me with an intensity that made looking away impossible and continuing almost unbearable. I need to write them anyway. Need to get them out of my head where they've been circling like vultures for months now, picking apart my concentration and my common sense. The words felt different spoken aloud. More vulnerable and exposed than they'd seemed when I was typing them in the privacy of my apartment. It started the day of the interview, which I realize makes me sound pathetic and cliché, but it's true. You walked into that conference room, and something in my chest just stopped, then started again, harder and faster, like my body was trying to make up for lost time. I could feel heat climbing up my neck, flooding my face. This was torture. You were wearing a charcoal suit with a burgundy tie, and when you shook my hand, your grip was firm and warm and lasted exactly 3 seconds, which I know because I counted. Adrian's expression shifted slightly, something flickering in his eyes that I couldn't identify before it was gone, his neutral mask sliding back into place. Keep going, he said quietly when I paused and I realized I'd been staring at him instead of the page. I forced my eyes back down. I told myself it was just nerves, just the normal anxiety of interviewing for a position I desperately needed. But then you smiled. No, not the professional corporate smile, but something genuine and warm and directed at me, and I knew I was in trouble. You asked about my experience with crisis management, and I somehow managed to give a coherent answer despite my brain short-circuiting from that smile. When you offered me the job on the spot, I should have been thinking about the salary, the opportunity, the career advancement. Instead, I was thinking about how I'd get to see you every day, which was both the best and worst possible outcome. I paused for water, my throat dry. But there was no glass on Adrian's desk, and I wasn't brave enough to ask for one. The first month was hell disguised as a dream job. You were professional, brilliant, demanding in ways that pushed me to be better. You remembered details about my life, that I took my coffee black, that I had a younger sister in college, that I was allergic to shellfish. Small things that probably meant nothing to you, but that I collected like precious stones and turned over in my mind every night. My voice was steadier now, falling into the rhythm of the words even as my heart continued its frantic percussion. I learned your schedule, your preferences, your moods. I learned that you tapped your pen 3 times against your palm when you were thinking, that you took your coffee at 7 a.m., 11 a.m., and 3 p.m. like clockwork, that you loosened your ties slightly when you were frustrated. I cataloged these details obsessively, and I know how that sounds. I know how I sound. Pathetic, unprofessional, inappropriate. You're not any of those things, Adrian said suddenly, making me look up in shock. His expression was still controlled, but there was something in his voice, a roughness, that hadn't been there before. Keep reading. My hands tightened on the papers. The moment I knew it was more than a crush, more than an appropriate workplace attraction, was the night we worked until 2 a.m. on the Hendricks merger. You'd loosened your tie, rolled up your sleeves. Your hair was messy from running your fingers through it. And you had this look of intense concentration that made something in my chest ache. We'd been surviving on coffee and takeout for hours, and when we finally closed the deal, you looked at me and said, I couldn't have done this without you. Jamie, the way you said my name, I had to stop. The memory too vivid, too painful. The way you said my name made me feel like I mattered. Like I was more than just an assistant, like I was someone you saw and valued. And then you smiled, exhausted and genuine and beautiful. And I wanted to kiss you so badly I had to physically grip the desk to keep myself in place. That's when I knew I was in love with you. Not infatuated, not crushing, but actually in love with my boss in a way that was going to complicate everything and end badly and hurt like hell when it inevitably fell apart. My voice had dropped to barely above a whisper. Adrian had gone very still, his hands now flat on his desk, his eyes never leaving my face. I'm in love with you, I read. the present tense hitting differently than the past tense had. I'm in love with the way you listen when people talk. Really listen like their words matter. I'm in love with how you fight for your employees, how you turned down the Mercer deal because it would have meant layoffs. I'm in love with your terrible jokes that you tell in meetings, and the way you laugh when no one else does because you think you're hilarious. I'm in love with your hands. I stumbled over that line, heat flooding my face again, but forced myself to continue. The way you gesture when you're explaining something. The way you absently straighten papers on your desk. The way you touch your tie when you're nervous, even though you probably don't realize you do it. The letter went on, detailing moment after moment, observation after observation, building a comprehensive catalog of all the ways I'd fallen for Adrian Castellano over 8 months of working together. Some parts were sweet noting how he always asked about my weekend, how he'd given me a bonus after a particularly difficult project. Some parts were more charged describing the time our hands had brushed, reaching for the same document and the electric shock I'd felt, the way my breath caught when he leaned over my shoulder to look at my computer screen, the dreams I'd been having that I couldn't quite control. All of it was painfully, vulnerably honest. I know this is impossible, I read, approaching the end now. I know you're my boss, that there are rules and regulations and professional boundaries that exist for good reasons. I know you're probably not even interested in men, and even if you were, you'd never be interested in your assistant who spends his days managing your schedule and answering your emails. I know all of this logically, rationally, in the part of my brain that's still functioning normally. But the rest of me, the part that lights up every time you walk into a room, that hangs on every word you say, that has memorized the exact shade of your eyes and the sound of your laugh. That part doesn't care about logic or professionalism or impossibility. My voice cracked slightly on the next part. That part just wants you to see me. Really see me, the way I see you. That part wants to know what it would feel like to have your full attention focused on me, not because I'm your assistant, but because I'm someone you want. Someone you might even feel something for, if I'm very lucky, and the universe is kinder than it has any right to be. But I know that's fantasy. I know the reality is that I'll keep coming to work, keep being professional, keep pretending that every casual touch doesn't set me on fire, and that every smile doesn't make my heart stutter. I'll keep being your assistant, doing my job, maintaining appropriate boundaries. And I'll keep writing these letters that you'll never read. It's pouring out feelings I can never express. Loving you in the only way I safely can. From a distance? In silence? Forever if I have to. The office was dead silent when I finished. The letter ended there with my signature and the date last night. Just hours before I'd accidentally sent it to the one person who was never supposed to see it. I couldn't look at Adrian. Couldn't bear to see whatever expression was on his face. Pity, discomfort, anger, disgust. My hands were trembling as I set the papers down on his desk, carefully like they might explode. I'll clear out my desk, I said quietly, standing up on unsteady legs. I'll have my resignation letter to you by end of day. I'm sorry, Adrian. I'm so sorry. For all of it. For making you uncomfortable. For being unprofessional. For sit down. His voice was rough, commanding, and I sat automatically before my brain could engage. When I finally forced myself to look at him, what I saw stopped all thought. Adrian's carefully controlled mask had cracked. His eyes were intense, almost fierce, and his hands were gripping the edge of his desk like he was physically restraining himself. "You think I didn't know?" he asked, and his voice was different now, raw in a way I'd never heard it. "You think I didn't notice the way you look at me? The way you react when I get too close? The way your breath catches when our hands touch?" He stood abruptly, moving around the desk toward me, and I stopped breathing entirely. "You think I haven't been watching you just as closely as you've been watching me?" I couldn't process what Adrian was saying. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense, because they implied impossible things. What? It was all I could manage, my brain refusing to form more complex thoughts. Adrian was standing directly in front of me now, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact, close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw, the storm brewing in those gray eyes I'd memorized in excruciating detail. "I notice everything about you." Jamie, Adrian said, his voice low and intense. The way you bite your lower lip when you're concentrating. The way you tap your pen against your notebook 3 times before you write anything important. The way you make my coffee exactly right, even though I've never told you my preferences because you pay attention. You always pay attention. The way you straighten your tie when you're nervous. Which is constantly around me, which I find both endearing and frustrating because I don't want you to be nervous. I want you to be comfortable. He stopped himself, running a hand through his hair in that gesture I knew so well, and the careful control he'd maintained started to slip. I made a mistake 8 months ago. My heart was hammering. What mistake? The question came out barely above a whisper. Adrian moved back slightly, giving me space to breathe, but his eyes never left mine. I hired you, he said simply. The moment you walked into that interview, I knew you were perfect for the position. You were qualified, intelligent, articulate. You had exactly the skills and experience I needed. But he paused, seeming to struggle with the words in a way I'd never seen him struggle with anything. I was attracted to you immediately, completely, in a way that was entirely inappropriate for an interview situation. The world tilted slightly. This couldn't be real. I was having some kind of stress-induced hallucination. Or I was still asleep at home, and this was a dream. Or I told myself it didn't matter, Adrian continued, starting to pace now. That restless energy I recognized from difficult negotiations. I told myself I was professional enough to handle it, that attraction didn't mean anything, that I could work with you without it becoming an issue. And I have been professional. For 8 months, I've maintained every boundary, followed every rule, kept every inappropriate thought and feeling locked away where it couldn't affect our working relationship. He stopped pacing, turning to face me fully. But it's been torture, Jamie. Absolute torture. Having you so close every day, working together, sharing space. And not being able to, he cut himself off again, jaw tight. Not being able to what? I asked, finding my voice even though it trembled. I needed him to say it. Needed to hear the words clearly because I still didn't quite believe this was happening. Adrian crossed the distance between us in 2 strides, and suddenly he was there, right there. Close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. Close enough to see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes that I'd cataloged so carefully. Not being able to touch you the way I want to, he said, his voice dropping to something rough and honest and devastating. Not being able to tell you that you're the first thing I think about in the morning and the last thing I think about at night. Not being able to say that every time you smile at me, my entire day gets better. Not being able to admit that I've been falling for you since that first interview, and it's only gotten worse every single day we've worked together. My breath caught. You what? It was eloquent, but it was all I had. Adrian's expression softened slightly, something almost tender breaking through the intensity. I'm saying I feel the same way, Jamie. I have for months. I've just been better at hiding it, or I thought I was. Apparently I wasn't hiding it well enough if you've been cataloging my nervous habits and memorizing my coffee schedule. There was a hint of humor in his voice now, slight but unmistakable. The Hendricks merger Nightwind, I told you. I couldn't have done it without why, meant it in ways that went far beyond professional gratitude. I wanted to kiss you that night too. I wanted it so badly, I had to leave immediately after. Had to put physical distance between us before I did something that would ruin everything. I was still trying to process, my mind racing to catch up with this new reality. But you're my boss. The rules, the regulations, the Adrian nodded. I know. Believe me, I know. I've spent 8 months being acutely aware of every policy, every potential conflict of interest, every reason why this couldn't happen. It's why I've never said anything, never acted on what I was feeling. The power dynamic alone, he shook his head. I never wanted you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. I never wanted you to think your job was contingent on anything except your excellent work. Which it isn't, he added firmly. Regardless of what happens between us personally, you're the best assistant I've ever had, and that's not flattery. It's fact. What do you mean, what happens between us? I asked, still trying to grasp the situation. Adrian smiled, and it was that genuine smile, the one that had made me fall in love with him in the first place. I mean that we have options, if you want to explore them. I've already spoken to HR this morning before you arrived. The company has policies about workplace relationships. They're allowed with proper disclosure and some restructuring. You wouldn't report to me directly anymore. We'd need to be transparent about the relationship to avoid any appearance of favoritism. There would be paperwork, meetings, possibly some awkwardness with colleagues. He moved closer, his hand coming up to hover near my face, not quite touching. But it's possible if that's something you want. If I'm not misreading this entire situation and embarrassing myself catastrophically, you spoke to HR? I repeated, stuck on that detail. Before I got here? Before you had me read the letter? Adrian's smile turned slightly sheepish, an expression I'd never seen on him before, and that was unfairly attractive. I read your letter last night, about 5 minutes after you sent it. I've been up all night thinking about it, thinking about you, thinking about what I wanted to say and how to handle this situation. The HR meeting was at 6 a.m. Ms. Chen was not thrilled about the early call, but she walked me through all our options, finally closed that last bit of distance. His hand cupping my face gently, and I stopped breathing. I wanted to be prepared, Jamie. I wanted to have answers ready for every question you might have, every concern. I wanted to be able to tell you that this is possible, that we can do this right, that you don't have to choose between your career. And he paused, his thumb brushing across my cheekbone in a gesture so tender it made my chest ache. And me. Why did you make me read it? The question had been burning since he'd first given the order. Adrian's expression turned serious, because I needed to hear it in your voice. I needed to know that what you wrote wasn't just late-night rambling or something you'd regret in the morning. I needed to hear you say those words, see your face as you read them, understand that you meant every line, and I needed you to see my reaction, to know that I wasn't horrified or uncomfortable or any of the things you were clearly terrified I'd be. His other hand came up to frame my face, holding me gently but firmly. I needed you to understand that I feel the same way, that this isn't one-sided, that when you say you're in love with me, his voice caught slightly, that I'm in love with you too, have been for months. Against all my better judgment and professional ethics and carefully maintained self-control, tears were burning behind my eyes, emotion overwhelming rational thought. This is real? This is actually happening? Adrian's smile widened, and he leaned in closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. Do you want it to be happening? He asked softly. Because I need to hear you say it, Jamie. I need explicit consent here. Need to know that this is what you want, and not just you going along with something because I'm your boss and you feel obligated.
Yes.
Because if that's the case, we stop right now and pretend this conversation never happened and nothing changes except possibly the awkwardness level in the office. I want this, I said, my voice stronger now, certain. I want you. I've wanted you since that first interview. I want everything you're offering and things you're not offering yet, and probably some things that are still inappropriate to discuss in a professional setting. A slightly hysterical laugh bubbled up. I can't believe this is real. I can't believe you're actually, but Adrian cut off my rambling by kissing me, and every thought in my head evaporated instantly. His lips were soft and firm and perfect, moving against mine with a confidence that suggested he'd thought about this as much as I had. One hand stayed on my face, the other sliding to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. I responded automatically, my hands fisting in his shirt, probably wrinkling the expensive fabric and not caring at all, because Adrian Castellano was kissing me. Actually kissing me, and this was better than any fantasy I'd constructed. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that for 8 months, he murmured. Every single day, every meeting, every late night, every time you brought me coffee, or smiled at me, or did that thing where you bite your lip when you're thinking. It's been torture, I laughed, the sound slightly breathless. Welcome to my entire existence since I started working for you. I pulled back slightly, needing to see his face, needing to confirm this was real and not some elaborate stress dream. What happens now? Adrian's expression turned thoughtful, though his hands stayed on me like he was reluctant to let go. Now we do this right. We go to HR on Monday, file the necessary disclosures. We reorganize the reporting structure. You'll probably report to Melissa in operations instead of directly to me. We're transparent with the team, professional but honest. He paused, his thumb tracing patterns on my neck that were absolutely destroying my ability to focus. And personally, we take this at whatever pace you're comfortable with. We go to dinner. We talk. We figure out how to navigate a relationship that started in the most professionally questionable way possible. His smile was soft, affectionate. We do it right, Jamie. No rushing, no assumptions. Just us, figuring this out together. I like the sound of that, I said, and kissed him again because I could now. Because this was real and happening and allowed. This kiss was slower, deeper, more thorough, with the promise of time and no urgent need to rush. When we finally broke apart again, Adrian was smiling. It's that genuine smile that had started this whole disaster, and I was smiling back, feeling lighter than I had in months. For the record, I said, "This is the weirdest firing I've ever experienced." Adrian laughed, a full, genuine sound that I'd never heard before in the office. "You're not fired. You're restructured." Completely different HR classification. Finally stepped back, though his hand found mine, fingers lacing together. "Take the weekend. Process this. If you change your mind, if this feels like too much or too complicated, we can still walk it back. Your job is safe, regardless. I need you to know that." "I'm not changing my mind," I said firmly. "I've spent 8 months cataloging your coffee preferences and memorizing your schedule. I'm not backing out now that there's actually a possibility of something real." Adrian squeezed my hand, his expression turning serious. "Then Monday, we start this properly. HR paperwork, team meeting, the whole process. But today," he glanced at his watch. "Today, if you're free, we could start with breakfast. There's a cafe 2 blocks over. Neutral territory. We can talk about expectations, boundaries, what we both want from this." The idea of a daytime actual date with Adrian made something warm bloom in my chest. "I'm free," I said. "I'm very, very free." Got. The cafe Adrian chose was small and quiet, tucked into a side street with outdoor seating that was perfect for the late autumn morning. We sat across from each other, coffee and pastries between us. And for the first time in 8 months, I didn't have to hide how I looked at him. Didn't have to moderate my expressions or police my reactions. I could just be honest, and it was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. "Tell me something," Adrian said, wrapping his hands around his coffee cup. "Something I don't know about you. Something that's not in your employee file or performance reviews." I thought about it, surprised by the question. "I wanted to be a writer," I admitted. "Before business school, before the MBA, before all of this. I wanted to write novels, tell stories. My parents thought it was impractical, which it probably was, so I chose a more stable path. But I still write sometimes late at night. Nothing serious, just," I gestured vaguely, "stories. Worlds where things work out differently." Adrian's expression was thoughtful. "Is that what the letter was? A story?" I shook my head. "No, that was real. Painfully, embarrassingly real. But the habit of writing things down, of processing through words, that's from the old dream." "You should pursue it," Adrian said simply. "The writing. Not as a replacement for your career, but alongside it. You're talented with words, Jamie. That letter was..." He paused, seeming to search for the right description. "It was beautiful, honest and vulnerable and beautifully written." Even while I was panicking about how to respond, about whether I was reading it correctly, I was thinking about how well you'd expressed these complicated feelings. "You have a gift." Compliment settled warm in my chest. "Maybe," I said. "What about you? What's something I don't know about you?" Adrian leaned back, considering. "I play piano," he said. "Ever since I was 6. My mother insisted on lessons, and I hated it at first. But somewhere around age 12, it clicked. Now it's how I decompress. Late at night, when the day has been too much, I sit at my piano and play until my mind quiets. You mentioned in your letter that I have hands meant for painting or playing. His smile was slightly self-conscious. I do play. Just not where anyone from the office can see me. I'd like to hear you play, I said impulsively. Someday, when you're comfortable with that. Adrian's eyes softened. I'd like that too, he said quietly, and reached across the table to take my hand. The gesture was simple but significant, his fingers lacing with mine in public where anyone could see. I want you to know something, Jamie. This isn't going to be easy. There will be people who question our relationship, who assume inappropriate things about how it started, or why you got hired. There will be awkwardness at work, complications with projects, times when we have to be strictly professional in situations where we'd rather not be. It's going to require communication and boundaries, and probably more HR meetings than either of us would prefer. I know, I said, squeezing his hand. I've thought about all of that. I thought about it for months before I ever wrote that letter. All the reasons why this couldn't work, why I should just bury these feelings and move on. But Adrian, I met his eyes directly. I don't want to move on. I don't want to pretend I don't feel what I feel. I want to try, even if it's complicated, even if it's difficult. Because the alternative is going back to how things were, and I don't think I can do that now. Not after this morning. Not after knowing you feel the same way? Adrian's grip on my hand tightened. Then we try, he said. Together. We communicate. We set boundaries. We do this right. And when it gets difficult, not if we talk through it. We don't hide things or let them fester. We're honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Deal, I agreed, and we sealed it with another kiss, right there in the cafe. Publicly and unambiguously declaring this thing between us. When we finally pulled apart, both smiling, Adrian's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and sighed. Work emergency. The Nakamura account needs immediate attention. He looked genuinely regretful. I'm sorry. First date, and I'm already canceling. I shook my head. You're not canceling. You're handling business. I understand, Adrian. It's what you do. I paused, then added, Want some help? I know the Nakamura account inside and out. Ikudi was already shaking his head. No. Today's your day off. And I'm not dragging you into work emergencies on our first date. That's a terrible precedent to set. But his phone buzzed again, more insistent, and I could see the tension building in his shoulders. How about a compromise? I suggested. We go to the office together, handle the emergency, which will probably take 2 hours maximum. And then we go do something completely non-work related. Dinner, movie, walk in the park, whatever you want. But we do it together, and we're not hiding. Adrian considered, then slowly nodded. Okay, but I'm counting this as evidence that you're already too good to me and I don't deserve you. Noted. Now, come on. Let's go save the Nakamura account. Again, we really need to get them a dedicated team. We walked back to the office hand in hand, and it felt revolutionary, this simple public declaration. When we passed the security guard, the same one who'd seen me enter nervously this morning, his eyebrows rose, but he smiled and nodded. Adrian kept his hand in mine all the way to the executive floor, in the elevator, down the hall. Only when we reached his office did he reluctantly let go, both of us needing to shift into professional mode to handle the crisis. The Nakamura emergency was exactly as complicated as I'd expected. A miscommunication about contract terms that threatened to derail a major partnership. Adrian and I fell into our familiar working rhythm, except now there was no need to maintain careful distance or hide reactions. When he made a particularly clever negotiating point, I could smile openly instead of keeping my expression neutral. When our hands brushed, reaching for the same document, we could acknowledge the spark instead of pretending it didn't exist. We resolved the crisis in 90 minutes, both of us functioning at peak efficiency. And when Adrian finally hung up the phone, after confirming everything was settled, he turned to me with visible relief. We make a good team, he said, and there was something in his voice beyond just professional appreciation. We always have, I agreed, moving closer. Even when I was trying to pretend I wasn't completely in love with you, we still worked well together. Now we just get to be honest about it. Adrian pulled me close. kissing me in his office with the door closed and the city spread out behind us through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I want to take you home," he murmured against my lips. "Not for anything except spending time together. I want to show you the piano, cook you dinner, just be together without the weight of secrecy or professional boundaries. Is that okay? Too much too fast?" "It's perfect," I said honestly. "Lead the way." Adrian's apartment was exactly what I'd imagined: spacious, elegant, with a stunning view of the city and walls lined with bookshelves. The piano he'd mentioned was in the living room, a beautiful grand piano that gleamed in the afternoon light. Adrian went directly to it, sitting on the bench and running his fingers over the keys without playing yet. "What do you want to hear?" he asked, looking up at me with an expression so open and vulnerable it took my breath away. "Something that means something to you," I said, settling onto the couch where I could watch him. "Something you play when you need to feel something." He thought for a moment, then began to play. The music was beautiful and melancholic, something classical I couldn't name but that resonated in my chest. Adrian's hands moved over the keys with confident grace, and I could see him relaxing into the music, the tension of the day melting away. When the song ended, he looked over at me. "That's Chopin. Nocturne in E-flat major. I play it when I need to remember that beauty exists, that not everything has to be business and strategy and corporate maneuvering." I crossed to the piano, unable to stay away. "Play something else," I requested. "Play something happy." Adrian smiled and launched into something lighter, more playful, and I found myself smiling too, caught in the joy of the music and the moment. When he finished, I applauded, and he stood, pulling me close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For being here, for giving me a chance, for writing that letter, even though you never meant to send it." I laughed. "You're welcome, I think. That might be the only time in history someone's been grateful for a mortifying accidental email." Adrian kissed me, slow and sweet. "Best accident I've ever experienced," he murmured. "Now how do you feel about pasta?" "I make a decent carbonara." We cooked together, moving around his kitchen with surprising ease, and I thought about how natural this felt. How right. We'd spent 8 months working together professionally, learning each other's rhythms and habits and preferences. Transitioning that into something personal felt like a natural evolution rather than a dramatic shift. We ate dinner at his dining table, talking about everything and nothing: childhood stories, travel dreams, book recommendations, terrible movies we secretly loved. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by touches and glances, and the occasional kiss when we couldn't resist. As evening turned to night, I realized I didn't want to leave. Wanted to stay in this bubble where everything was new and exciting and hopeful. But I also knew we needed to pace ourselves, needed to do this right. "I should probably go," I said reluctantly, though I made no move to actually leave. Adrian nodded, equally reluctant. "Probably," he agreed. "But I don't want you to." He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me. "Stay. Not for I mean, we don't have to." He seemed flustered for the first time all day, and it was endearing. "Just stay. Sleep here. We'll have breakfast, spend tomorrow together, figure out what our Monday morning HR meeting needs to cover. Just stay." His honesty was disarming. "Okay," I agreed. "I'll stay." Relief and happiness flooded Adrian's expression. "Good. Perfect. I'll find you something to sleep in." He disappeared down the hall, returning with a t-shirt and sweatpants that would probably be too big, but that I didn't care about because they were his and would smell like him. I woke up in Adrian's bed with morning light streaming through the windows, and the man himself wrapped around me like a very attractive octopus. One arm was slung over my waist, his face buried in my neck, and I could feel his steady breathing against my skin. For a moment, I just lay there, processing the fact that this was real, that I'd somehow accidentally sent the most mortifying letter in human history and ended up here, in my boss's boyfriend's bed, being held like I was something precious. The universe had a weird sense of humor, but I wasn't complaining. Adrian stirred, tightening his grip before his eyes fluttered open. For a second, he looked confused. Then awareness crept in and his expression softened into a smile. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough with sleep, and it was possibly the most attractive thing I'd ever heard. This is real, right? I didn't dream yesterday. I turned in his arms to face him properly. Unless we're both having the same dream, it's real. You made me read my embarrassing love letter out loud, confessed you felt the same way. We went to breakfast, saved the Nakamura account. And then you played piano for me and made carbonara. I paused. Also, we're apparently now in a relationship that requires HR paperwork. Adrian laughed, a morning rough sound that I wanted to collect and save. That's an accurate summary? Yes. Any regrets? I pretended to think about it. Well, I could have done without the public humiliation of reading the letter. Maybe next time just text me I like you to like a normal person. He grinned, unrepentant. Where's the drama in that? Plus, I needed to hear it in your voice. Worth the mortification. He kissed me morning breath and all, and I decided that starting days like this was something I could definitely get used to. What time is the HR meeting tomorrow? I asked when we finally separated. Adrian glanced at his phone on the nightstand. 9 a.m. Ms. Chen was very clear about documentation procedures and the timeline for implementing structural changes. She's emailed me approximately 17 documents to review before the meeting. 17? I sat up, reaching for my own phone to check emails. Sure enough, there was a message from HR addressed to both of us, with an intimidating number of attachments. This is more paperwork than when I got hired. Adrian sat up too, running a hand through his sleep-mussed hair. Workplace relationships require disclosure, new reporting structures, conflict of interest waivers, professional conduct agreements. The company's very thorough about protecting both parties and maintaining professional standards. It's actually good means they take these situations seriously, have protocols in place. He scrolled through his own phone. We should probably spend today reviewing all this, making sure we understand what we're committing to. I groaned dramatically, flopping back onto the pillows. You're telling me we have to spend our first full day together doing HR paperwork? That's the least romantic thing ever. Adrian lay back down beside me, propping himself on one elbow to look down at me with amusement. I'll make it up to you. We'll do the paperwork? Then I'll take you to dinner at that Italian place downtown you're always ordering lunch from. The real restaurant, not just takeout. Proper date, public, and obvious. That got my attention. Vittorio's? But that place requires reservations weeks in advance. They're always booked. Adrian's smile turned slightly smug. I may have made a reservation. Yesterday afternoon, after our breakfast date, just in case things went well, and I wanted to take you somewhere special. You made a reservation before we'd even gotten through one date? I was torn between being touched and amused. Confident, weren't you? He shrugged, not quite meeting my eyes. Hopeful. There's a difference. I figured if things didn't work out, I could cancel. If they did well, I wanted to be prepared. I've been waiting 8 months for this, Jamie. I wasn't going to waste time once it was actually happening. The honesty in his voice made my chest tight. For the record, I said, pulling him down for a kiss, I'm very glad you were hopeful. And presumptuous. And prepared. It's very you, and I love that about you. Adrian smiled against my lips. Come on, let's get coffee and tackle this paperwork. The sooner we finish, the sooner we can pretend to be normal people on a normal date who didn't meet through a mortifying email accident. We spent the day on Adrian's couch. Laptops out, reviewing document after document. HR had been thorough. There were forms acknowledging the relationship, forms establishing new reporting structures, forms about professional conduct and conflict of interest, forms about what to do if the relationship ended, forms about disclosure to team members. It was overwhelming and tedious and absolutely necessary. This section's interesting, Adrian said, highlighting something on his screen. It talks about managing public perception and maintaining professional boundaries at work. Basically, we can't act as a couple in the office. No visible affection, no special treatment, no personal conversations in professional settings. We have to maintain the same professional relationship we had before, just with the added context that everyone knows we're together. I read over his shoulder. That seems doable. We were already good at professional boundaries. We just won't have to pretend not to feel things anymore. Adrian nodded, but his expression was thoughtful. It also means we'll need to be careful about projects we work on together. Can't show favoritism. Can't let personal feelings influence professional decisions. If we disagree about something work-related, we have to be able to argue professionally without it affecting our personal relationship. He looked at me seriously. That could be challenging. Are you prepared for me to potentially shoot down your ideas in meetings, even if we've discussed them positively at home? Asterisk, are you prepared for me to push back when I think you're wrong, even though you're technically not my boss anymore? I countered. Adrian's smile was approving. Good. We need to be able to separate work and personal. It's going to be crucial for making this sustainable. We continued through the documents, discussing each section, making notes, asking questions to clarify with HR later. By the time we finished, it was late afternoon, and my brain felt like it had been through a legal seminar. Okay, I said, closing my laptop with finality. No more work talk. No more HR documents. For the rest of today, we're just two people who like each other, going on a date. Agreed, Adrian said, looking equally relieved. Let me get changed. Dress code for Vittorio's is business casual at minimum. An hour later, we were seated at a corner table at Vittorio's, candles flickering between us. The restaurant's elegant atmosphere making everything feel special and significant. Adrian looked devastating in a navy button-down and dark slacks. And I'd worn the one really nice outfit I owned, a charcoal suit that Adrian had complimented once months ago, and that I'd secretly hoped I'd have an occasion to wear for him again. The food was incredible, but more than that, the conversation was easy and comfortable. We talked about everything except workbooks. We were reading, places we wanted to travel, embarrassing childhood stories. I have a confession, Adrian said over dessert. I've been wanting to take you here since about month 3 of you working for me. Every time you ordered from here for lunch, you'd get this look on your face when the food arrived, like it was the highlight of your day. I wanted to be the reason for that look. The admission made me smile. You were already the reason for that look, I said honestly. The food was just a bonus. You'd always ask how my lunch was. Remember little things I'd mentioned liking. Half the time, you'd order enough food for yourself and then conveniently be too full and offer me the extras. I knew what you were doing, Adrian. I wasn't oblivious. I just thought you were being nice because that's who you are, not because I gestured between us. Because of this, Adrian reached across the table to take my hand. I'm not that nice, he said with a slight smile. I was absolutely showing favoritism. Probably violated about a dozen HR policies in retrospect. I just couldn't help myself around you. He paused, his expression growing more serious. Tomorrow, everything changes. We file the paperwork, restructure the team, announce our relationship. People are going to talk. They're going to make assumptions. Some of them will be supportive. Some will be skeptical. Are you ready for that? I squeezed his hand. As long as you're beside me or, at least in the building somewhere. Since we can't actually be beside each other in professional settings, I'm ready. We're doing this right, Adrian. We're being honest and transparent. Anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with HR. Adrian's smile was proud and affectionate. Have I mentioned I love how you handle things? That letter was terrifying to write, but you did it anyway. This relationship is going to be complicated, but you're jumping in anyway. You're brave, Jamie. Braver than me in a lot of ways. I felt heat climb my neck. I'm not brave. I'm just tired of pretending. 8 months of hiding how I feel was exhausting. This is actually easier, even with all the complications. We finished dinner, and Adrian insisted on paying despite my protests about going Dutch. Let me do this, he said firmly. You can buy next time. We'll take turns. But tonight, let me take you on a proper date where I pay for dinner and walk you home and kiss you goodnight like we're in some kind of romantic movie. I can live with that, I agreed, and let him do exactly that. We walked through the city as evening turned to night, Adrian's hand warm in mine, talking about nothing and everything. When we reached my apartment building, he pulled me close, kissing me with a thoroughness that suggested he was reluctant to let the evening end. Tomorrow's going to be intense, he murmured against my lips. HR meeting, team announcement, probably some uncomfortable conversations. But we'll get through it together, okay? And tomorrow night, after it's all done, I'll make you dinner and we'll debrief and remember why we're doing this. I kissed him again. Looking forward to it? Now go home before I invite you up and we both get no sleep because we're too busy talking. Adrian laughed but stepped back. Text me when you're inside safe. The request was casual, but revealed care that made my chest warm. Always, I promised, and watched him walk away before heading into my building. Pulling out my phone to text him before the elevator even reached my floor, inside safe. Thank you for tonight. For everything. For making this work. His response came immediately. Thank you for taking a chance on this. On me, see you tomorrow morning. Don't be late to the HR meeting. I smiled at the familiar command of impersonal texts. Adrian couldn't help being slightly bossy. Wouldn't dream of it, boss? His response was a simple emoji that somehow conveyed both amusement and affection. And I went to bed feeling lighter and more hopeful than I had in months. The HR meeting was exactly as intense as promised. Miss Chen, the head of human resources, was professional but thorough, walking us through every document, every policy, every potential complication. She explained the new reporting structure I'd be transferring to operations under Melissa Carter. It was professional and competent, and someone I'd worked with positively on several projects. Adrian and I would no longer have a direct reporting relationship, which eliminated the primary conflict of interest. We'd still work together on projects, but always with other team members present. Always with proper documentation of decisions and rationales. I need to be clear about expectations, Ms. Chen said, looking between us seriously. This relationship is permitted under company policy, but it requires absolute transparency and professionalism. Any hint of favoritism, any suggestion of improper influence, any failure to maintain professional boundaries in the workplace, these could result in disciplinary action, up to and including termination for both of you. The company is allowing this relationship, but we're also protecting our interests and those of your colleagues. Understood? We both nodded, signing what felt like 100 documents. When it was finally done, Ms. Chen's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I've watched you to work together for 8 months. You're professional, you're good at your jobs, and you clearly respect each other. If you can maintain that while also building a personal relationship, I think you'll be fine. But the minute work quality slips or boundaries blur, we'll need to have a different conversation. The team announcement was scheduled for 10 a.m., a mandatory all-hands meeting where Adrian would address several company updates, including the restructuring. I sat in the conference room with everyone else. No longer at Adrian's right hand, where I'd sat for 8 months, but in the back with the other assistants and junior staff. It felt strange, but necessary. Adrian stood at the front of the room, commanding attention as always, working through the agenda efficiently. When he got to the organizational changes, my heart started pounding. Finally, I need to announce some structural changes in executive support. Effective immediately, Jamie Foster will be transferring from my direct reports to operations under Melissa Carter. This change is being made to address a personal relationship that has developed between myself and Jamie. We've filed all appropriate disclosures with HR, and we're committed to maintaining complete professionalism and transparency. The room went absolutely silent. I could feel eyes turning toward me, could practically hear the whispers that would start the moment the meeting ended. Adrian's expression remained neutral and professional. I want to be clear that this relationship began after Jamie was hired, that it in no way influenced the hiring decision or Jamie's performance evaluations, all of which have been and will continue to be based solely on merit. If anyone has concerns or questions about conflicts of interest or professional conduct, please direct them to HR. Are there any questions? Several hands went up, and Adrian fielded them with his usual calm competence, addressing concerns about workflow changes and project reassignments. No one directly asked about the relationship, though the curiosity was obvious in every face. When the meeting finally ended, I was immediately surrounded by colleagues, some congratulatory, some clearly fishing for gossip, some professionally supportive. Melissa Carter approached with a warm smile. Jamie, welcome to operations. I'm looking forward to working with you directly. Can you stop by my office after lunch? We'll discuss your new responsibilities and how to transition your current projects. I thanked her, grateful for the professionalism. Not everyone was as kind. I overheard whispers in the break room, comments about favoritism and inappropriate relationships and whether I'd slept my way into the job. It stung, even though I'd expected it, even though I knew the truth. Adrian had warned me this would happen. We discussed it, prepared for it. That didn't make it easier. At lunch, I escaped to the small park across from the office, needing air and space to process. I was sitting on a bench, forcing myself to eat a sandwich I didn't really want, when someone sat beside me. I looked up to find Marcus Chen, the company's CFO and Adrian's closest friend at work. He was in his 40s, perpetually serious, and had always been professionally cordial to me, but never particularly warm. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, though he was already sitting. I shook my head, bracing for whatever judgment was coming. Instead, Marcus surprised me. I've known Adrian for 15 years, worked with him at 3 different companies. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. I've also never seen him compromise his professional ethics or play favorites. If he says this relationship didn't affect his judgment about your work, I believe him. And if anyone gives you trouble about it, you let me know. Understood? The unexpected support made my throat tight. Thank you. That means a lot. Marcus nodded, standing to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, you're good at your job, Foster. I've watched you manage Adrian's impossible schedule and handle crisis after crisis with competence. You earned your position here, relationship or no relationship. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.